is Kristy Ealdwine. Work for SAWS. SAWS is a nonprofit that works in wilderness areas, mostly focuses on Region 8, the Southeast, and the Appalachian region. And I'm also on the Wilderness Character Monitoring Central team, so we provide support for wilderness character monitoring across the country as people are writing their narratives, baselines, and now rolling out their trend reports. We help interpret the tech guide, ask questions. We have a building frequently asked questions, and eventually we'll add things into the tech guide as things that weren't addressed in the tech guide like have popped up. And yeah, so we have a PDL and we have office hours. So don't be shy about asking questions to us in general. So here we're focusing on trends or the 10-point level in terms of WSP. So the baseline's been done. There's two different things that need to happen. One is entering data and keeping up with data on a yearly basis, keeping up with WSP on a yearly basis. And then we have the trends, which come out every 5 years. So if your baseline came out in 2020, it'll be 2025, and then every 5 years after that. This is a breakdown of the measures and who's responsible for the data for all of them. So the central team data analysts will pull some of the air measures, water quality, water condition class, and stuff like that when you do your trend report in 5 years, and the rest need to be tracked by the forest. Here is for NRM, there's some training options, so just don't forget that tab exists. So entering data into NRM over annually is really important as we roll out these trend reports, and I'm going to show you why later. But training, if you have questions on how to do that, is there. So this is the cycle. So wilderness character monitoring is an ongoing thing. It's not the baseline's kind of the big lift, but then we need to keep up with our WSP data, keep up with our reporting, and then make main actions based on the data as that grows. So the goal of wilderness character monitoring is to see if the wilderness is improving, degrading, or staying steady from where it started at designation. Or sometimes it's going to be where our far enough data that our wilderness goes back for. So in these examples, these different wildernesses, when they were designated, they had different levels of like modern human influence that made them less wildernessy, right? So we're comparing them against themselves over time and not against other wildernesses. This is an example of, for the baseline, we get data as far back as we can. So we start as far back as designation. We might put in the data just for just as like some background evidence, but the trend for that measure starts as far back as the data goes. So say this is designation, say it's 1986. So this measure is going to have data from 1986 to present, whereas this one just goes a couple years before the baseline. So each measure has a different point where the data may start. This is a review of how this is broken down when we quantify the trend. So each measure is going to have a trend, then each indicator is going to have a trend, each monitoring question has a trend, and each quality has a trend, and then there's the overall wilderness character has a trend. So this is about how the trends are calculated and how they're added up. So I'm going to be showing this in kind of like a math version of this on the next slides. So the measure is going to be improving, stable, or degrading, and how that's calculated is said in the baseline, how the trend's calculated, and the WCMD will calculate this automatically based on the formula that's needed. Okay, so then we get to the indicator, So we have one measure that's improving, one that's degrading, one that's improving. That ends up to be an improving for that indicator. And then this is how other combinations. So another indicator has one improving, one steady, that equals improving. Then two steadies equals steady. And then an up and a down, that's going to be the offsetting stable. And then we move those to the monitoring questions. Those are then added up in the same fashion. And then we move to the quality, and those are added up in the same fashion. So what that looks like is we have the column for the measures, and each of those have an arrow. Then based on what indicator is relevant for that, those are added up. Based on the question, those are added up. And then now we have each of the 5 qualities. Those are added up. And then we have the overall witness character. So there's a chance that this arrow or this visualization is going to change, but the concept of improving, degrading, steady is going to be consistent if we choose a different visualization. So if it ends up to be there's an equal number of upward and downward arrows, the untrammeled quality is the tiebreaker. And the reason for that is that in the Wilderness Act, that's the most like distinctive word that's used. So untrammeled is going to be the wilderness is not manipulated by people, and no other designation of land uses that word. So that's why sometimes that's going to be like this quintessential aspect of wilderness and will be the tiebreaker in the example of this. So there's 2 reports, and to complete the 10-point level, there's 2 reports. One is going to be the wilderness character monitoring trend summary report. This is going to be consistent across all the agencies, and is going to be close to what we were seeing there, and there'll be more examples in a second. It's going to be close to the arrows and then a summary, right? And then the 5-year trend assessment report is going to be closer to the baseline and going in down into the details, although it's going to be more concise than the baseline. So the trend summary report hasn't been fully fleshed out yet. If you're doing the trend this year, we have some mock-ups of what to do right now, but the goal is we're doing some improvements to the WCMD, the Wilderness Character Monitoring Database. That's where you enter in all the data for the baseline and for the trend years. Our goal is for these to be easily and automatically kind of like visualized, and then we just add a summary into it. Right, so once that is done, right now we have to do some of that manually, but once it's done, these will be able to be cranked out. And the cool thing, so this is the example here of what we're just looking at, of a visualization and then a summary, and we might have another like page for each measure, each quality specifically. So the cool thing about these are mock-ups from Keeping It Wild 2. So once we update the database to do this easily, then, okay, so say the GW Jeff that has 23 wildernesses. So they want to run a report and see how all 23 wildernesses are doing. They can do that. This is an example of region report. So region 8 has, I don't know, 88 or something wildernesses. So they can do a report, figure out what's there. So they can be like, okay, like now I can focus on, if I don't already know what's going on in these wildernesses that are degrading, like they can get on a call and start having conversations about how to improve that. So these are other example mock-ups. So then also like across the country, we can see if we're achieving the goals of the Wilderness Act. And this isn't used to punish people who have wildernesses that are degrading. It just means these have needs that we need to focus on improving, right? And sometimes it's going to be that the wilderness is degrading because of influences outside the wilderness. So the water quality is getting impaired, like it's issues in the town that's upstream from it. So sometimes we can't even make management decisions to improve this, but we could still potentially work with the community on that issue, even if it's happening outside wilderness. But when it's happening inside wilderness, we can use this data to be like, okay, the wilderness is degrading because we have too many rec sites. Maybe they'll start, and we have data for multiple years that shows this. Maybe we need to start looking at options to manage the rec sites to do less damage and less human impacts to the wilderness. So the 5-year trend assessment, we're going to be rolling out the template for this very shortly. This is what I've been working on this past winter doing, and so it's going to follow the format of the baseline, but I standardized some things like tables and stuff like that. We're going to try to make it as fill-in as possible. We're also going to customize this template for each wilderness. The central team is going to do this. Customize it for each wilderness. We're going to delete the measures not selected, delete the protocols not selected. And then this template will be used every 5 years to enter in the past 5 years of data. For now, this document will need to be signed to complete the 10-point level, and then also entered into WCMD. And you also enter into WCMD as you work, because that will tell you what the trend is. You don't need to get out your calculator for that. Okay. So this is what's going to happen after we start getting trends. So the first year this rolls out, some of the measures are going to only have 2 points. And we can get some information for this, but also just know that this program has like a really long-term thing. Like we're going to have really good ideas of trends at 25, 50, 100 years down the line. We're going to be like, this is what's happening. But when we do have areas to improve, we're going to develop new things to help people like fix the problems that are going on, like have examples of other places that have like had these issues and can fix that. And so these two WAG and WIMPs, these two acronyms here, the National Wilderness Teams, are going to help develop resources to make it easy to help a degrading measure. So the data can be used to make decisions for forest planning, other projects, policies, programs of work, identifying monitoring needs when there's incomplete or low quality missing data. Okay, so here I'm going to be diving into what is the process to begin the 5-year trend assessment report. So I've gone through this process in addition to developing the template. So I'm going to go through what this looks like. Here are the resources that we're going to initially roll out with the template in the next week or two. So what we have is the template, and then we have an example report of the template being used. I have the data management and 5-year chart that you can use to help keep track of your data. I have a complexity chart. So a lot of people are asking like, how long is it going to take to do the trend report? And so we've developed a chart to help go through that with folks. And then we have some guidance on correcting baselines too. And we're going to be going into some more details about these. So what I'm going to be showing is an example of Ellicott Rock Wilderness, and the following will be examples of that as I've gone through filling this out. So this is going to vary based on your wilderness and what measures have been selected. But for Ellicott Rock, I have 10 measures that are that I can pull from NRM. So 50% of my data could be there. And if that's accurate, then that makes this part very simple. And we'll go into what those are. So 6 measures are pulled from the central team data analysts. So those ones between the 5-year chunks, I don't need to think about those too much. Then I reach out to the data analyst, right now Jim Edmonds, and he can pull the data in and then I analyze it. Then 4 measures from the local unit. And so 20% of the report is coming from local unit data. And we'll dive into that. So the NRM pieces. So my first step is that I went into NRM WCM and I downloaded the reports for each of the 5 years. And then I put them into a spreadsheet. And this is half of what this looks like. So I pulled into a spreadsheet and put down what was reported in NRM. And you see I have a column and it is what is NRM and what is the actual data for that year. So what's happening here is that I got all the NRM data and then I met with the local unit and talked about this data. Right now in all the wilderness areas, this isn't 100%, but we're working on getting to 100%. So so for like trembling actions, a big one, they reported trembling actions. Double checked that. So these are the different measures. The next slide will have another set of measures. The grayed out ones are the ones that Elkhart Rock did not select. And some things are simple. Like in holdings, like a big event happens where an in holding is bought. Or in this example here, there's 0 in holdings, and it's very unlikely that that number is going to go up after that. This section is trails. So I have what was reported in the baseline, and then what it says in NRM, and then I double checked that what it is currently at the end of fiscal year 2023. And then when I find errors in this, I work with I have the data info of where it's getting pulled from. I'll work with the specialists to update the data as well. But if this is good, then I got 50% of my trend report done. Okay, this next section, these are the 6 measures that are pulled from the central team data analyst. So I have the value reported in the baseline and then the value that they reported in the most recent piece of data that they have. So when something comes up like here, I have, okay, there was 0 miles of impaired streams and now there's 1.46. So then I started doing a deeper dive into, okay, that's new, that's why that's happening. Whereas water condition class, there hasn't been a change there. So there might not be a lot that I need to address in the trend report because it's just saying consistent. And then the air qualities, those are getting better. Then I might just be like, okay, that's good. I'm going to add in the new data. There aren't a lot of new things happening with air the past 5 years, so I can just do a quick summary and move on. These are the 4 measures that aren't a part of either those 2 things, the central team data analyst or NRM WCM. So for invasive species, non-indigenous plant species, they selected to do a survey for WSP and for WCM. So when I came on to do this, that survey wasn't done, so we're looking into getting that done. The non-indigenous terrestrial animal species, that's professional opinion. I asked the specialists and they gave the same numbers. Index of encounters and wreck sites, these were done before I came on to do this. They're on these 5-year cycles. One is 2014, 2019, and one's 2018, 2023. So these are collected for WSP and WCM, and I was able to process that data and enter it in. Okay, correcting baselines. Some important things that we decided is that a baseline will not be redone or re-signed. We will make any edits to it in the 5-year trend assessment report. And but if we are making changes, WCMD does need to be updated with the accurate or new data set. Sometimes a new measure selection may need to be reviewed and signed. Examples of that right now in Region 8 for the beginning of wilderness character modeling, they selected wet deposition of nitrogen, wet deposition of sulfur. It's looking like that might not be data that's continuing to be collected. So if that's the case, if I switch that to total deposition, I'm going to have to get that re-signed. Another wilderness has run into the fact that the measure selection form didn't match the baseline. And so they needed to get that re-signed because of that. There are also some corrections because before the tech guide was released, there was a rough draft and then some wilderness character modeling even happened before that rough draft. But there's a couple changes from that rough draft to the 2020 final version, and that includes collecting data for fire for trammeling actions, and some changes in protocol option 2 for invasive plants. So sometimes there'll be a correction because of that. And sometimes it'll be because of human error. This is a complexity rating chart that we created to help people understand for their specific wilderness, how much time they need to set aside to do the report. And so the columns, no, the rows in blue, those are constant things. So your wilderness has a certain amount of acres, number of districts, regions, or agencies that are part of it. So the more regions or district or agencies, that's the more communication interaction between groups of folks that you need to deal with. So that increases complexity. And then to some extent, size can increase complexity too. Then things about the baseline. So the data year. So the earlier that it was made, if it was made before the 2020 official tech guide, we're rating that as a more complex situation because you might be correcting some errors. And then there's just general baseline errors that need to happen, and that's just more complexity, going to take more time. The data section, this is something that the local unit does have a lot of control over. So are they keeping up with entering NRM WCM over the past 5 years, and are they making changes? So say a road shows up in the wilderness, and are they working with the roads people to make it that officially closed in the Forest Service system and stuff like that? Then are they entering, the big things are entering in trammeling actions every year, entering in motor mech uses every year, and is that accurate? Then yeah, WSP data. So some of the big ones here are going to be invasive species, solitude monitoring, user developed trails, rec sites. So if you selected those for WSP and WCM, is that data there? Is it ready to go? Does it take a lot of processing, sifting? Is it on some hard drive and you spend a lot of time finding it, or is it ready to go? And then specialists. So when you send a message to the wildlife biologists about some terrestrial animal species in the forest, or the silviculturist about a species killing trees, do they get back to you, and do they have a position? So this is a chart that kind of automatically adds up your complexity. It has these drop-down menus where you pick which one is relevant to your wilderness. This is an example for Ellicott Rock. And here I have the different elements selected. So Ellicott Rock is on the corner of South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia. So it's in 3 forests. It's on 3 districts. So those are the big ones standing out here. And so I have it in the low end of the moderate category based on this. And this is not perfect, but this is an idea when you're trying to like do planning for your trend report. So this goes into planning for the interval years. And I have this again broken down into like where the data is coming from, who's responsible. So NRM, so these are things that need to be kept up and approved every year in NRM WCM. And then the tramline actions, authorized or unauthorized, need to be counted and recorded and make sure that those are accurate. Where some of these are pulled in NRM are pulled in from other agencies, but you need to approve it for accuracy. Then the central team data list, like those you can just think of on the year of the trend that you're doing the trend report, and you don't really need to think about those much on the off years. So yeah, local units. So some of these are professional. If you choose professional opinion, you just need to ask every 5 years. If you have an actual survey, you need to make sure you go out and do that survey before the fiscal year for your trend report ends. This is a breakdown of the other qualities. So these are all NRM ones. This one, they selected one here for the central team data analyst. And these are local unit, again, WSP things. So these have cycles that are not, these are not in sync with the 5-year trend cycle. So here we need to know that this year solitude monitoring needs to happen, right? And here we need to know that this year unauthorized trails need to be collected, and that's going to show up in the following trend report, because my trend report is going to end at fiscal year 23, but now we're in fiscal year 24. These need to be collected, and then I know that rec sites need to be collected this year. So this is a way that you can keep track of the things that you need to do in between the years. Here is a list of resources. So we have the bi-weekly office hours. If you are doing, and that's something that anyone can be added to and join. If you are writing a trend report, we are doing not quite an open office hours, but like a worker trend report meeting. So you can reach out to the central team if you're writing, if you're doing the 10-point level this year. We're gonna have another meeting. We're gonna answer questions, but also work through the kinks as we roll out the program for that. But feel free to reach out to the central team PDL for questions related to wilderness character monitoring or the trend report specifically. So we have the wilderness character monitoring opinion box, and that's where all these resources for the trend report are gonna roll out, and resources for everything else and trainings uploaded, templates, examples, FAQs, and the more stuff that we have, it'll be out of there, and that can be for internal or external people can join that. Wilderness.net, that's open to everyone. It doesn't have a whole lot of stuff about the trends right now. Has more stuff about the other parts of wilderness character monitoring. Then we have the tech guide, Keeping It Wild, and the quick start guide. This shows what the central team is kind of built off of, who's a part of it. And we provide support for NRM WCM, and then building all these documents in the WCMD, the Wilderness Character Monitoring Database. This is here a list of people on the team. Okay. Next, I'm going to jump into what the template looks like a little bit. So I'm going to stop sharing and open that up. Are there any initial questions before I share some of that?
Kristy, we had one question in the chat from Paul Hauser.
Okay.
Sorry, Paul, if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Would it be possible to get a copy of the template to track NRM trend data at the forest level. Apologies if this is already available.
Yeah, so that we're about to release those documents that I showed in that slide. We're about to release them. They're going to be in the opinion, including the template for that. So that's going to have extra measures. You're going to have to go through, delete the ones that your wilderness is not using, and then it's good to like start using for your specific wilderness. And you can start that whenever. You don't have to be doing a trend report right now for that to be useful.
Great. And Mike has his hand up. So if it's okay with
thank you.
Yeah.
We're gonna I know that the two wildernesses I'm working on are going to simply be late on getting updates to solitude monitoring and rec site inventory, and there's not really very much we can do about that. I wasn't quite sure from your presentation how WCM deals with that particular problem. Secondly, I actually had a conversation with Portia Jelinek about this. Some of the LSRS data for in-holdings is severely skewed because they have holes punched because of weird ways that the forest boundary was drawn years ago, and we just kind of needed a manual override to deal with that. Could you address one or both of those, please? Thank you.
Yeah, so there's a couple things. I think we are working on adding that manual override into NRM WCM, but that is just, expect that to take time. It's a complicated and long process for that to get added, but that is on the list of things to add for those specific situations. We don't want people to use it for just, they don't want to work with their lands people to correct data, but there's some things that the NRM WCM isn't doing correctly where we do need that manual override. And then the other question is that is answered in the correcting baselines document, I think, or one of our FAQs that's going to be released. And the answer is, we're going to have a null point in data if the data has not been collected. And so if it turns out your interval for rec sites is 8 years right now, it goes on an 8-year cycle, there's going to be a null point for when you roll out the trend report, and then 1 or 2 points is going to be on the second trend report that comes out. So if possible, like, get 2 more points to catch up, but if not, we just need to keep the whole program for the trend reports is not going to be delayed. Like, our goal is to keep it in sync, but we understand that on the ground the situation is more complicated. Does that answer your question, Mike?
Yes, I think that does. It's just the exigencies of what we can get done don't always match what is needed.
Yeah. Cool. I got another raised hand. R. Lewis.
Yeah, hey there, Kristy. This is Robin Lewis. I work for the BLM. And I'm just curious, does the Forest Service, this is a little adjacent to what you presented, but is the Forest Service providing like standardized or example protocols to staff for things like encounter monitoring or campsite condition assessments, to your knowledge? Or like, how does that tie in with some of the like databases that y'all have, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So some of these things have overlap between WSP, Wilderness Stewardship Performance, and WCM. So for when you do rec sites or solitude monitoring for WSP, it says to follow the minimum protocol, and then there's documents that you can get from wilderness.net and probably other places that are what the minimum protocol is to do that monitoring program, and then that's in sync with wilderness character monitoring and WSP, what is used.
Very interesting. Okay, well, I'll check out wilderness.net and see if I can find those
Cool.
resources. I think
and
that's
make
something
sure
a lot
to
of people in the field struggle with. They're like, ugh, like, how do I do this? And then they're like trying to reinvent a protocol. And so that's really cool to hear.
Yeah, so the first step for those things is to have a plan. So you're gonna write a plan, and you're gonna say if you're using the minimum protocol, if there's a couple other pieces of data you might add. Or for like Clifty Wilderness, they started a slightly different protocol that was more detailed than the minimum, but they started during a limits of acceptable change, so they decided to move forward with that protocol. So it's just writing a plan about how you're doing it. And then the goal is to like collect it consistently each year. And so when you use wilderness.net, make sure to click on the practitioners tab in the top right corner. And they'll have you get you access to those additional documents, and you can click solitude monitoring or rec sites or whatever, social trails, whatever you need for that.
They also have the enhanced solitude monitoring protocol in the same place. So if you're interested in that, it's a one-stop shop.
Definitely. Okay, if I have some extra time, I'm gonna share my screen and show you guys what the template is gonna look like. And so I'm gonna scroll through the beginning of this pretty fast. So this first page is just it adds on to the code that's in the baseline template. It gives you some additional details of this. This will then be deleted. Then we have similar format for the baseline for a little bit in terms of the pages here, table of contents and stuff like that. I'm going to roll through that. That's directly looking like that. So here, we're going to have the overview summary of the measures and the visual indicator of the arrows in the front to give a summary. And then we're going to have the full summary report in the back. So this is like just standardized text explaining what each section means. And now I'm going to dive into this, and I'm going to zoom in. Okay, you're seeing a lot of similar things to the baseline, but some new stuff. We're going to have the baseline value and then the latest trend value. So right now, so for us, it's going to be if this is comes out for fiscal year 23, that's going to be the last year of data here. In highlights, I have some examples or some stuff to delete and put in with relevant data. So as much as possible, we're going to not repeat things in the baseline, but we're going to have a reference to the measure page there. So say for trammeling actions, I have what we can use the example here. Here we have fish stocking, grazing allotments, and fire suppression. And if I already, so new fire suppression that's happened in the past 5 years, maybe I write a short paragraph about that recent fire and like what that looked like. If the fish stocking and grazing allotments are something consistent and I already wrote about that in the baseline, then in the text section I don't really need to add to it because the same fish are being stocked, they're going to the same streams, and we're counting that consistently. But if a new thing happens, so say, okay, we started treating princess tree, an invasive tree in the wilderness, and that's a new tramline action we're doing, then in the background, it's not called background context, I'll show you that in a second, I'm going to be writing more information. So starting to standardize the tables, I have a template table and then an example of it plugged in. Then you can delete that example of visualization. And then here I have updates since last report. So that's what I was talking about. Okay, there's a new action that is starting. Like we didn't talk about invasive species. We're going to dive into there. Fish stocking still happening, same place, like no updates. So we're going to keep this. We're trying to make this as like quick as possible to do. But if there is stuff that needs to be addressed, we are going to do it there. If we found an error, like, oh, hey, when I was doing my research, there was one more fire that wasn't counted in the tramline measure and the baseline, then I'm going to talk about that here and update the data here. Okay, gonna zoom through a couple things. So here's an example. We're in invasive plants, non-indigenous plants. Here we have a different template for different protocols. So we have a template for protocol 1, and then we have one that 2 or 3 can use. So long term, we're gonna have these all done up, but if not, you're gonna have to delete the things that aren't relevant. Okay, so here's an example of an error measure. So we're just gonna add the last 5 pieces of data. So an example is here. We're not going to go and put the full set of data in here. And then Jim makes these diagrams so we can add the diagram that he gave us here. Okay, let's see. Sorry for the scrolling. Just kind of showing how some of these are done up. So standardizing the table. This is solitude monitoring, again, different protocols. And then examples of how the table is used. Okay. Anything, I'm gonna stop sharing and then I can show you an example if we still have time, but I'll stop for any questions about this.
I noticed in your 5-year trend assessment report, you had data for non-indigenous plants and separate data for non-indigenous animals. Is the WSP performance element for invasives being split up between plants and animals? Yeah.
Yeah, so this could be a better question for Eric Sandino, but as far as my understanding for the WSP element is that you at the beginning of it, at the lower point levels, you need to assess your willingness for what is important, and then you can hone in and focus on something, right? So then I think after that you can focus on plants if that's the most important thing. If you do a general search and you discover that I need to focus on plants and I need to monitor wild hogs, then you should move forward with WSP and monitor those things that have stood out. But as far as I understand, you do not need to monitor every single thing going on in the wilderness after you've assessed what like the general situation is. Okay, quick thing here. I'm showing kind of how a correction can be done in this example. So I'm saying that the baseline reported 26. I'm correcting this to 18 and saying that it is still 18 now in this one. So what that looks like is I'm putting in the accurate data here, and then I'm creating another table correcting the baseline and saying what changes were made and why. And I'm adding that here. And then if there's any explanation, I'm going to do it there. So some of this is going to have to do with less guidance on how some of these measures are collected, I think is why this is not accurate in the baseline. So this is an example of how to make corrections. And I wanted to kind of highlight that. Another thing I can, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. We have another
That's
question in this chat. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, this is from Lee Johnson. Does the Forest Service WO have plans to fund partner-based assistance with these reports? We can't get basic reporting done. This is another huge lift with limited capacity for. That might be another Eric Sandino question, but
Yeah, Eric Sandino or my supervisor who is like gonna be here, but they are working at requesting that and using data to show needs for it. But I can't promise whether the funding will come. I do agree that if the Forest Service wants to implement a program, that the funding needs to be there to implement the program. So I understand the that is a need. And so there are people fighting for it, just can't promise whether it happened or whether it could happen this year and then not next year and stuff like that.
Thank you, Kristy, so much for presenting for us today.